welcome Chris Gdowski, who is Superintendent of Adams 12 Schools, to our Local Heroes series. And he has had his hands full since we went into this pandemic last March. And I'm going to ask Chris some questions about what it's been like to manage such a big school district in this COVID moment that we've faced as a nation and as a world over the course of the last year, almost 9 months for sure. And so, Chris, first of all, welcome to our Local Heroes. We've had interviews with police officers and firefighters and bicycle makers and liquor store owners and a lot of folks who've really had to adapt to the coronavirus and its effect on our community, but also who've gone above and beyond because this thing has had such an effect across the board. And so clearly schools, teachers, staff, students have really been affected by the virus and the different things we've had to do to cope with it. So tell us a little bit about yourself. You're a Coloradan, you're from your own school district, but tell us a little bit about yourself. And then let's go back to March of this year and how the district had to start dealing with the virus.
Yeah, thanks so much, Rep. Perlmutter. I really appreciate the invitation to be here with you today. So as you mentioned, I am a Coloradan and grew up in Adams 12, did elementary, middle, and high school there, finished Thornton High in 1985, went off to CU Boulder undergrad, and then after a year's break working at the Federal Reserve Bank, went back to CU to the law school and earned a law degree. From there, I practiced school law statewide, had about 60 clients throughout the state, really affluent places like Aspen, Telluride, Steamboat, some high poverty communities in the San Luis Valley, and a lot of small farming communities in northeastern Colorado were my clients, and did that for about a dozen years. And roughly for the last 11 years, I've served as superintendent in Adams 12, and it's a tremendous honor to serve the community that nurtured me and helped grow me up and equipped me with skills to go out and make a difference in the world. So it's been an honor to serve.
Well, it really has had to be just kind of a nice culmination for you to be able to take over the reins of the school district where you grew up. But clearly in the last 9 months, whatever skills you've developed, whatever knowledge of your school district you have, both having been a student there and then having represented the school district, now having been a superintendent, have been put to the test with the virus. So take us back to March when everything started to run, directly into the virus and a terrible transmission and contagion that we faced back earlier in the year.
You bet. When I go back to March and think about where we are now, I'm still baffled at how this has all turned out, because back in March when we were starting to have the initial conversations with Governor Polis and public health officials, I think many of us thought if we just take an extended spring break of 2 to 3 weeks time and we all hunker down, the virus will pass by, we'll kill it off, and by mid-April we'll be back in the saddle and back doing school again. Obviously not the way it's going to work, and the governor told us then that you're going to be grappling with this virus for a long time, including when you come back in August, September. I think many of us were skeptical. We also didn't want to believe that was going to be our life, and it certainly has been our challenge that we have this pandemic that's still very much in front of us now. We've had to do a lot of changing throughout that process, and I'm just tremendously grateful to our staff, our educators, our principals, and our support staff who've had to make very fast adjustments, really, sometimes overnight, saying we're going to go from an in-person setting to a remote setting, trying to figure out the technology. How do you adjust your teaching practice to be engaging and supportive? Folks like our bus drivers who've one day driven a bus, and then the next week they might be supervising a group of students in a cafeteria who are using technology to access some remote learning from a teacher. So lots of flexibility, lots of change, admittedly a lot of frustration. Most of us aren't feeling nearly as good about the work we're doing now as we have historically, and so there's been a lot of frustration for us as staff in the system, but my colleagues, our staff in the system, have really inspired me all the way through.
Well, so why don't you give us some stories about your staff and your teachers where, you know, this has been difficult, and I know there's been a lot of frustration, but I'll bet you there are instances where there's been a lot of satisfaction given, you know, the difficult moment that we're all facing.
You bet. So a number of things come immediately to mind. One piece that I've heard a colleague in another state say about the work we're doing now is we're 50% educator and 50% social work, social services. And so the need for us to step in and provide food, clothing, basic necessities, internet connectivity has been immense all the way through this process. And we've had individuals that have opened up their home porch to be the place where people can bring clothing, toys, bicycles, diapers. One of our staff members, literally, as I've gone to her porch a couple of times, it's just piled high with all these donations. And then she works with others in our system to make deliveries to families in need. That's an inspiring story. Our educators, I can just tell you from my own personal experience, I have a couple of children, a 7th grader and a 9th grader in Adams 12 right now. And their educators have been extremely patient and working with students morning, noon, and night over the weekends, pushing them, encouraging them, giving them second chances, giving them grace, but just being cheerleaders for our kids all the way through, not giving up. And it's easy for our kids right now to feel like school has less joy than it used to because they don't have that in-person social interaction with their peers for most of the semester that often drives a lot of our kids to want to come. And yet our educators are just there to cheerlead, to nudge, to encourage, to support, and they've been fantastic that way. And then our support staff, they've just been fantastic. These folks who are used to driving buses, and now they're having to learn all the intricacies of technology and how to access various school technology platforms like Schoology, and to go from driving a bus that might have high school kids on it to having a group of 10 kindergartners that you're having to supervise and keep busy throughout the day. They've done a fantastic job and just tremendously proud of our staff.
Nice. So let's come fast forward to this fall where I'm sure there were opportunities to, I don't know whether you guys had hybrid or you had in-person, then hybrid, then remote, but kind of walk us through that. And then let's talk about what we can expect going forward.
You bet. So back in late July, we made our best prediction of what the future was going to be like. And at the time that we were making those decisions in late July, we were in the midst of a big surge. And at that point, public health knew quite a bit less about coronavirus than they do now. They felt like schools would be a place of significant transmission. And so given that data and those recommendations, we started remote. And we did that for about the first 5 weeks of the school year. What we did for our elementary students and for a number of our middle school students were have these learning pods for the first 4 to 5 weeks where we could keep kids in very small groups, keep them spread out, and help them have internet connectivity and student supervision so parents could be to work. And we did that for about 5 weeks. But we know that the best thing that we can offer is in-person schooling for families and students who want it. And when we saw the virus rates really significantly come down in early to mid-September, we committed to coming back in person and did that for varying amounts of time. From about October 1st through the 21st, we had a hybrid model for middle school and high school where kids came 2 days a week in person and had 2 days a week where they were doing some live remote instruction with a teacher. Our elementary kids were in person 5 days a week from October until the week before Thanksgiving break. Unfortunately, we just found ourselves eventually in a spot where things began to surge in mid-September and it was unrelenting all the way up until Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
And we just found ourselves in a spot where the number of our staff out on quarantine was becoming so significant that we couldn't staff our positions. We were flexing everyone that we could. We would move a campus supervisor to supervise a 3rd grade group if their teacher was at home on a quarantine. But we found within about a week's time that 7 of our elementary schools had more than 30% of their staff at home on quarantine. We just couldn't staff things any longer. So from the week before Thanksgiving through the end of the semester, we'll be in this remote space. And our staff feel like they're really getting some traction now, that moving back and forth through these changes has been difficult for our staff, students, and families. It's been nice to have consistency this last month. As we look to the January timeframe, because we still have a pretty large incidence of cases in Adams County, a little bit over 1,000 cases per 100,000 right now, we believe we'd still be having lots of school closures and quarantine activity if we tried to start back in person immediately on January 5th. And so the recommendation I've made to our Board of Education that they'll be considering tonight is that we start remote, and we do that for about 2.5 weeks, with January 25th our targeted date to come back in person for the entire system. If we do that, just because we want to keep class sizes smaller and keep students distanced, we won't be able to have our middle school and high school kids back every day of the week. We'll still have them in twice a week in person, but the other days they'll be live streaming into the classroom. So even if you're sitting at home, you see your teacher in the classroom, you see the rest of your class in that classroom, and you can pose questions and interact. We feel like that's going to be a big improvement over how we started this year.
Now, you guys have had to just bob and weave and adapt, really on a day-to-day basis in some respects, and, with the different age groups that the district teaches and the families. This has got to be, in all of your scenario planning, all of your planning generally, did you ever think about something like this pandemic and how you would work with it?
We haven't. I mean, there's some members of my team who were around when H1N1 was a concern. We have some folks on our staff who have public health backgrounds who worked with Tri-County before. And so they've done some planning about pandemics and how to respond and manage things through. But just given the gravity of coronavirus and how it can be so lethal and it's so pervasive and easily spread, a lot of the past planning around things like H1N1 only took us so far, and we really found ourselves in uncharted waters, and we've been grateful for the grace and patience that our staff and parents and students have shown us as we try to find the just right balance of serving them and keeping people safe at the same time.
Well, I think the 14th, so Monday, for a variety of reasons, but particularly it was a red letter day because the vaccine started to be distributed. And so I think, I'm just speaking as Ed Perlmutter, the eternal optimist, but I do see us starting to get on the other side of this thing. And eventually it's going to be several months still, no question. We've got to persevere, and we've got to be disciplined over the next few months to really get this virus in the rearview mirror. But I do think we can, with the vaccines, with teachers especially, and your staff that have to deal with the public on a day-to-day basis, being early in the priorities for getting the vaccine, not the very first, the nursing home residents and their caregivers or the hospital folks, but your people will be up pretty early in the process. I think we can start getting back to some normal, probably, towards the end of the school year, but at least you can get back to normal. And have you worked with the governor's office in this? I know he's been talking to superintendents across the state. So are you all involved?
Yes, we have been. We've been tremendously grateful for the governor's personal attention and engagement with a number of superintendents as well as his staff. Even the week of Thanksgiving, the Tuesday before Thanksgiving, shortly before the governor was diagnosed with coronavirus himself, I was invited to participate in a call about quarantine standards and how they might be adjusted in a manner that still keeps our students and staff safe, but maybe they're a little less restrictive so that we can maintain more consistent staffing and keep in-person schooling humming along. And he was gracious in giving us half an hour to an hour of time that day. And I've probably been on a half dozen calls with the governor thus far, a whole lot of time with staff at CDPHE, the state epidemiologist, public health officials. They've all been tremendous partners. They all value tremendously the importance of serving our kids in the school setting, and we're just grateful for all their support.
Well, I want to thank you for joining us today. I know you're a very busy guy, especially given all the commotion related to this virus, but you're a busy person just, running a big school district as you do. And I know you've got a good board and you've got fantastic staff, but Chris, you're one of our local heroes. To be able to manage this and, have everybody sort of keep their wits about them, and to, even though there's been frustration and some irritation, to keep the school district going forward. We just want to thank you. I want to thank you personally. You are a local hero. You're a double buff. You're a lawyer who has moved on to running a school district. And I just like you to finish with any words of you would like to share with the people in Adams County and Jefferson County, because that's who will be watching this Local Heroes segment.
Well, thank you first off for inviting me here today and for that recognition. Very much undeserved. The real heroes in our system start with our Board of Education and are joined very strongly with the staff in Adams 12 that have just done yeoman's work all the way through. But I'm happy to be a representative of all those heroes in Adams 12 that have worked tirelessly to make this work well. I share your optimism about the future. I know this has been a challenging time. I've now been a parent for 28 years, and this is undoubtedly the most challenging, frustrating time to be a parent, especially when it relates to the schooling piece. And yet if we can all hang in there, be diligent, vigilant, make good choices in the weeks ahead, I too share a lot of optimism that as we head into 2021, we're going to get back to a place much closer to normal. And we're just excited to have kids back and to get them back to that place that they want to be in so badly.
Well, Chris, thank you so much for joining us today. You can now go back to your normal or not so normal duties, given the fact we've been in this pandemic. But thanks for your service to our community, and thanks for being a local hero.